So, welcome everybody to this month's edition of Mortgages with Millennials. I'm Robbie Chrisman, joined per usual by Kristin Messerly, and we are very, very excited to have Ardley's Taylor Potter on today. Taylor, I'm so excited that I'm actually going to preempt you and thank our sponsor very quickly here, and that is Form Free. Thank you, Form Free, for sponsoring today's show. For those of you that might not be super familiar, the Form Free Passport revolutionizes borrower pre-qualification by seamlessly collecting financial data and combining it with advanced cash flow intelligence. It enables lenders to perform efficient, low-cost pre-qualification analysis. Formfree.com. Check it out. Okay, Taylor, back to you. I'm so excited to have you on the show. Uh, Maybe before we launch into your bio, Kristin, you said Taylor would be a great guest. What your experience with Taylor has been and kind of why you wanted her on the show today.
Where do I even start? So
Great
Taylor,
question.
I have known Taylor for a very long time. Taylor, when was it? Like 2012?
Yeah, surely.
Yeah. So I actually was pitching a new business before I started cultural outreach and in an entrepreneurship program at OU. And that's where I met Taylor. She was leading the program in Tulsa. And Taylor taught me just everything. I like getting started and became a very close friend, and then ended up working with me at cultural outreach for several years. So I've known her for a very long time. She's been such an influential person in my life. And of course, main reason I wanted her to come on the show is she's an incredibly influential woman, young leader, innovation leader at Ardley in the mortgage industry today. And so we'll have lots of good conversation.
Taylor, maybe rather than me reading off a sheet, you could do a little intro about yourself and also what Ardley is all about.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. That was a very kind intro. And I love every time our lives have taken us apart, we get to come back together and do really fun things like this webinar today. Kristen was my introduction to mortgage. Prior to working with Kristen and cultural outreach, I've spent my career working with innovators and entrepreneurs that have great ideas and are working to build the business. And so that's been everything from gas chromatographs, right? Instruments used in analytical chemistry to novel cancer drugs to a best-selling cookbook author and Food Network TV show star to Kristin Messerly, our mortgage and millennial star and cultural outreach. So I love being able to work with people that are really great at their craft and build the business around it. And then Kristen introduced me to Nate Dinherter, the CEO and founder of Ardley. And so I've had the privilege of working alongside him for the last 4 years now, which feels like a blink of an eye. And Ardley works with mortgage servicers. We're white labeled enterprise software that uses data to really change the mortgage process and flip it on its head by delivering offers to every borrower every time pricing changes. So servicers know exactly who in their portfolio can qualify for any mortgage at any point in time, which is really relevant in today's market when
Really relevant.
3 week little boomlets of rate and term refis pop up. And
Mhm.
if you're a large servicer, you don't have time to call all those people that qualify in a short period of time. So,
That's an altruistic way of putting things. I was going to take the more cynical route and say with Rocket buying Mr. Cooper and all the stuff going on, UWM taking their own, putting their stakes in the sand. I'd be freaking out too if I was trying to figure out who can I potentially have as a refinance candidate with everything that's going out there. So yeah, certainly relevant. But you're glossing over things a little bit though. Kristen introduced you to the founder. What made you say, "All right, I want to go to battle here. I want to work with Ardley. I believe in this vision."
yeah. First of all, Nate has a deep understanding of mortgage and mortgage tech. So he spent 15 years at Fannie Mae, and that's anytime I've worked with an entrepreneur, right? The first thing I'm looking for is like, do they have a deep understanding of the industry and the challenges? That's why I loved working, with Kristen and her work in just millennial home buyers and understanding mortgage and then applying that to consumer psychology. And with Nate, it's same thing, but with mortgage tech. So 15 years at Fannie Mae in the innovation group. He, was built some of the first versions of Collateral Underwriter. And then Tim, our CTO, ran pricing technology at Fannie Mae. And so we just have this leadership team that has amazing depth in mortgage. And then we've been able to combine that with a product and a tech team that's best in class at what they do, which I love. I love working around innovators and people that are the best at what they do. And I think we found, and Nate found with Ardley, after doing a lot of deep research and working with loan officers and working alongside mortgage executives, of where there's a real gap in how servicing data is used on the origination side to build a better consumer experience. Really, if you look at like the innovation that has happened in mortgage, and having not, having watched from the sidelines and now looking back, you see where investments in technology have like quadrupled over the last 10 years. But it's still more expensive to manufacture a loan than ever before. And so I look at that and say, like, something in the process is broken. If we're investing more in tech and our margins are compressing, like, okay, then somehow this tech investment isn't working. And so I think Ardley is fundamentally taking a different approach to how you invest in tech.
Yeah, I think one thing that I love about how your brain works, Taylor, is just whenever you see a problem or something chaotic, you have such a unique way of being able to pull things together and kind of see a different pathway. And I'd love to hear from you, something having entered the mortgage industry really a long time ago, but at this point in different sectors. I'd love to know how your thoughts on the industry has changed over time, and maybe some early idea, and maybe all of us can talk about this, but some early ideas you had about the mortgage industry that has changed as you've worked through some of these problems or seen the industry evolve.
Yeah, I think, Kristen, having like tangentially kind of known some of your experiences and hear you talk about the industry, I don't know if I ever had like their assumptions that weren't built on some of the work that, I was able to work with you on. And just that, like, there seems to be this technology disconnect in where consumer tech is moving in every other industry and where it is in mortgage, and that gap somehow continues to widen.
Mhm.
And just, the way technology grows in every other industry in a way that really supports the consumer side of things, that investment has just looked differently in mortgage. I probably now understand why a little bit more, right? Just the volatility in rates and that cyclical nature of the industry. And so how that, when you're in boom and bust and hiring and firing cycles of LOs, you're not, and then how you think about that with the tech investment alongside of it. Like, the industry has some really unique challenges that you don't see other places. So I probably understand some of those reasonings a little bit more, but I'd still love to, and working with Ardley to solve that problem.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like, even Robbie and I are both second generation in this industry, and but I still felt like I agree, like you see this gap, and I see it in the distrust that consumers have towards the industry. And I think I understand a lot more why that exists. But it still is there, and it's still widening. And when it comes to technology as well as distrust and looking at the consumer experience, I think that's something that has surprised me as I've continued to work in the industry, that we're still not at a place that we're fixing that. I mean, we've got solutions where there's a path forward, but that has been a surprise for me. Robbie, what about you?
Yeah, I'll kind of flip it as well. And I will say, I thought the industry could be a little more agile with things. My background in the industry, I came on, this is forget my college internships. My first full-time job was at SoFi. And we were trying to revolutionize the mortgage process. And we very quickly realized you get bogged down in these regulations and you can't be as nimble as you want. I've had this like weird faith in my head that the industry could start to do things in a new way, could live up to consumers' modern demands of what they want from an experience when getting a good or a service. And the longer I'm in the industry, the more I get kind of beaten down and jaded. And Chris and I talked to our friend Jeremy Potter about this a lot, about like what can the industry do better. And I remember, I interviewed somebody on my daily podcast, and they essentially said the industry is really good at finding debt obligations, but not good at finding income. And there's all these things that we've talked about in this podcast with home hacking, or maybe someone rents out part of their garage to somebody else that has a vehicle. Why can't we count these different income streams, but yet we count every single debt obligation? And it seems like I'm getting a little frustrated at uh, some of the ways that regulation is bogging us down. However, the flip side of that would be we are starting to see a lot more demand in the non-QM space. We are starting to see some of these other products, whether that's reverse lending or home equity lending, start to come to the fore a little bit to shed some of these negative reputations.
Mhm.
Both home equity lending, non-QM, reverse mortgages, those all used to have a lot more negative connotations, and now the products are engineered intelligently enough where that's not as much the case, and that to me is promising. I just wish that we could, as maybe we move away from Fannie and Freddie with them being reprivatized, new players come about where some of these underwriting guidelines or standards or whatever it might be get altered in a way that it creates a more seamless process, that it makes the industry get to the point of where consumers expect it to be. The tech that we talk about at these shows when, Taylor, we're at MBA secondary and what's the tech offerings out there? I talk to people about the AI offerings. The tech seems to be there unless people are overly touting the capabilities of their products. Why can't we get the process there? And it feels like maybe we are on the precipice. So I just went through this valley of despair, but maybe I'm
Yeah,
back.
well, add to that in our capitalism economy, right? One of the only decisions that you don't get to make is who your mortgage servicer is.
Mm,
So yeah, you can originate a mortgage thinking, okay, they're going to retain servicing. Maybe if you're a first-time home buyer, you probably don't know to ask that. You probably never thought about like what happens after the transaction. You pay someone. But when your loan is bought and sold by different entities, and with Ardley, we approach that with like, we want you to be a servicer of choice. And that wasn't necessarily the consumer's choice. They didn't have a say in the matter. And it's one of the few things with the largest financial transaction of many consumers' lives that they don't have a say in. It's
mhm.
what happens afterwards.
I've talked about that on the show. That was my biggest surprise in all this. Outside of, hey, you get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. That's not your payment. The payment's not fixed. The rate is fixed. Uh, my stuff got sold to Chase from a company that I thought I had like a good relationship with, and that's why I originated with them. Sold to Chase. Fortunately, I have a credit card through Chase and an auto loan through Chase, so I was like, all right, it's fine for you to own this other thing. But yeah, it could be frustrating, especially if you don't enjoy working with that certain servicer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember being so upset because I had built this, I was so excited about my lender when I first bought my home. And then when I got the notice about it going to Wells Fargo, I was like, that's not who I chose. And you
Mhm.
just don't know as a consumer what you're getting into. And I know, with Ardley and any of the work, Taylor, that you've done has been built really a lot around how to improve transparency and the building more positive consumer experiences. One thing that Robbie and I have talked a lot about on this show is AI and how automation is improving that experience, but also some of the fears that the industry has around losing that human touch.
Mhm.
And I'm curious your thoughts as a tech leader, what your thoughts are on how on where the industry is going around that, and your thoughts on that potential gap between the human touch experience and automation and AI and the direction there.
Yeah, I love that question because Kristen, you've always talked about like loan officers needing to be the trusted expert, and having that trust built there. And I think in a lot of ways they're amazing at their relationships, but they haven't necessarily had like the systems always to support them. Case in point, when I bought a new house a year and a half ago, I fill out a blank application. My loan officer calls me and is like quoting off rates and payments. And I'm like, "Oh, can you put that in an email?" And she's like, "Well, I just have it on this scratch paper in front of me. She's like, so I can send you a picture of it. And it's like, wait, I'm engaging in this large financial transaction and you've got a scratch paper of rates and payment amounts. And like something's wrong with that. So I believe absolutely that the LO should be this, relational and trusted expert, but why not flip that head on its process? And that's, really what we work on at Ardley, which is if you're already engaging with Chase or Wells Fargo or whomever your servicer is, why, when you log in to your servicing portal or when you call them and you're interested in knowing if you can refi, because maybe you're like me and you got a mortgage in the last year and a half, why do you have to fill out the application and start over again? When they know who you are, how
Hmm.
much is left on your mortgage, they probably have done, have your credit in the background. So what we're able to do is price all of those options up front every day when pricing changes and show the borrower that. So show you when you're um uh if what cash out you're eligible for, what home equity you're eligible for, if you're eligible for a rate and term, what those are, and show them all next to each other. So I think that's really powerful in terms of utilizing technology to its advantage, utilizing the data your consumers know you have, showing them what they qualify for up front. And then, that makes the LO, an author and advisor and not someone spending an hour trying to pull different systems together and pricing and, servicing data and do that work themselves. Like let the technology do that work and let the human, let the LO be the relationship expert.
That's probably a good segue into some of the tech stuff that we wanted to talk about here. Companies are bombarded right now with AI offerings, and we had a joke at secondary that the lenders were taking off their name tags because they'd get chased around the hallways by vendors being like, "Try my tech, try my tech." Vendors are almost outnumbering lenders at this point based on how much volume is going on out there. I say that a little tongue in cheek. Don't roast me in the chat. But when it comes to Ardley and what tech or AI you're using to simplify the process for your clients out there, what have you taken into uh, use? What do you trust right now? What are you hoping to implement as we go into the future?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons tech can be expensive is because there are so many API calls, right? And so if you are when you're in that process of building and connecting, right? Like people take their fees at different places. And so, I mean, I think we're really excited. And so we at Ardley, we've really thought about that, to how can we keep everything we do lowest cost to the lender and our success is their success, right? So, we get paid on closed loans. I think that is something that the industry is going to have to move towards when everyone wants their piece of the pie up front. All the stuff that is happening with credit reports right now and those being so expensive. And any data sold up front, right? That really doesn't matter what the outcome is to the lender. And so I think we're going to have to be really cautious of an industry and thinking about like what the value chain looks like over time. But yeah, I love we have a couple of clients and prospects that are like rebuilding their tech stack. And those are really fun conversations to have when they're thinking from the ground up, like when they're willing to, say and they're going to make a big change on an LOS and where do we go to and how do we think differently? So yeah, that's fun.
Well, let's let Kristen real quick. I
Yeah.
want to address the comment in the
Yeah.
chat, if that's okay, from Dave. The servicer is not the friend of the mortgage broker or lender, as they bought the loan into the servicer's realm and they take the business from the. How do you work? I'm almost just like respond, but like how do you work with so that everybody's kind of on the same page here, things are copacetic, and we're just doing the best for the client at the end of the day or the borrower.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, like servicers are servicing the loan. Many of them do have originators, do originate the mortgage too. And so when you have that marriage, you want your borrower to have an amazing experience. And I think anyone operating their business these days is looking for that consumer experience. On the flip side, that's where we go to talk about things, but we also work with companies that are originators and can do the same thing with origination data and empower the same borrower experience. So they're not they're not necessarily mutually exclusive from how Ardley views the world. But just when you think about data sets that exist, whether it's in origination data, whether it's in servicing data, whether it's in depository data, whether it's credit card data, and you think about what you know about your borrowers, utilizing the framework and that competitive advantage that you have as a business to then make the experience better for the consumer.
And I do think this is where there's a need for the lender to be thinking beyond the transaction. And in the past, it has been very limited to this, the point the person fills out the application to the point you close the loan. And if you're doing more beyond that of checking in, doing annual reviews, things like that, then you're not as likely to lose that client over time. And you're more likely to also get referrals and things like that. So we've talked a lot about how to build up your client base well before they're at the point of being ready to buy. But we also need to think then well beyond the point that they have bought.
Yeah, and all you have to do is look towards the Rocket and Cooper news and how Rocket talks about like the lifetime of a borrower. And that, that helps close that loop. And so, yes, well, there's the largest in the industry leading that discussion. I think everyone has to be thinking about how you maintain that relationship with the borrower, and deliver a great.
Where do you think that we're moving in terms of the servicing industry? And I don't mean churn, because technology can get better at hitting people up the moment that they might qualify, but in terms of that relationship between the servicer and the borrower, and keeping people happy and building this brand loyalty, because I think that is a huge focus of people, is this repeat business. And hey, even if some super servicer hits up my borrower, they still feel loyalty towards me because of the way that I held their hand through the process, through the relationship that we've built. And it goes beyond just sending a Christmas card. It could be giving you certain tidbits and tips on financial success and health, even after the loan is closed. There's different things different people do, but when it comes to building those relationships, how does Ardley see that as we move into the future?
Yeah, Robbie, I might answer the question a little bit from left field because remember, like I'm newer to the industry,
Good.
right? Like 5 years. And so I think about it a lot as a consumer. I hear what our customers say. And I also think about it a lot as a consumer and like what's the best for the whole system, not just what's in it for me. And so personally, looking at like just having a mortgage in the last 18 months and knowing like I don't know what interest rates are going to do, but if they go down, I want to be ready to refi the cheapest way possible. Like, as a consumer, think about that whole financial transaction. What's in it for me might not be going back to um really depends on who calls me and tells me there's an offer available. And at the end of the day, it is a commodity. But if there's the relationship there to say, hey Taylor, it's time for you to refi, it's been over 6 months and here's how much I can save you on this mortgage. I want that phone call, I want that reach out, and I want to do it in the most efficient way possible, as a consumer. And so, I think changing that, like, yeah, what is servicing going to look like? What are things on broker shops going to look like? I don't know, but I can tell you as a consumer, I want that in my hand, when it makes the most sense.
You also, I mean, you make a really good point that I would like to impress upon people in the audience in general here, and that is people that have worked in the mortgage industry for a long time don't own the future of the mortgage process. It almost took, like we've been talking about, and I'll use an example that might not be so popular, but electric cars, why didn't they work? Why didn't they work? Tesla and our good buddy Elon came in straight from the side and like torpedoed the whole industry and so I almost think mortgage is right for someone coming in completely from left field, completely from the side, and redefining the process. And maybe that is kind of like we're seeing with Figure doing HELOCs, that, hey, some of these traditional underwriting standards, if we can have a takeout that isn't Fannie and Freddie, and doesn't have to fit into these certain guidelines of the certain box. Non-QM does that to a large extent today, but that's going to be the future of mortgage. And all these people that think they know the process and, oh, I've refined the process. Well, you haven't refined it enough to where origination costs have come down below $10,000 or $12,000 loan. So I think somebody's going to come in. I think somebody's going to upend it. And I hope that we're ready as an industry for radical change like that, because something is not right if we continue down this path we're going on, where we talk the process is getting better, we can close a loan so quickly, blah blah. Okay, why does it still cost so much? And why can you get beat on rate by private lending institutions? So
Yeah. I mean, it's the same way. Like I live in Oklahoma, right? So oil and gas is the same way. Like when oil is $100 a barrel, no one thinks about how do we change the manufacturing process so we can make money at $50 a barrel. And lending is a lot like that, right? It's like, how do you change what is the process gonna look like? Because you can't control the macro environment.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to get turned on its head necessarily, but it could be, hey, the brick and mortar retail branch mall thing of the past. There's ways that it could be better. Kristen, I feel like I cut you off there though.
No. I was just, I'm curious if you have seen in working with Ardley any kind of difference in the way that millennials and Gen Z interact with the process or in that data, and how how they're making decisions differently from previous generations. And if not even in that experience, just in general, I know that you have even with me and working in the past, understood some of those generational differences.
Yeah, so looking back at like my parents, their first mortgage was 17.5% as boomers. And they didn't really know what they were getting themselves into. And I think that was the case for a lot of people were, getting their first mortgages in the early 80s. So now as we look at, Gen Z and millennials and first-time home buyers, I think there's a lot more education out there and it's driven by the consumer, where previously that wasn't the case. And so in the day, in the world that, gosh, my neighbor told me yesterday, he's retired and he's like, hey, I got on Grok to plan my trip to London and Ireland, right? And like that itinerary is at his fingertips. Millennials and Gen Z are driving that need for the information at their fingertips. And that's forcing the industry to be better and do better. And that's what I love about what we're able to do at Ardley is pull that information to the front, not for a borrower to be able to see everything they qualify for right up front and very transparently, and then be able to move through the process. And if you don't qualify because of certain rules, they know why, and then they know what other products that might be interesting to them. And when you give them that data, they make I think more educated decisions. One thing like we're able to do is see cash outs and home equity products, like price them right next to each other. And so, we see when consumers are interested in $30,000 versus $50,000, and there's a lot of factors there, but like them knowing the product that's best for them, based on what they consider best, whether it's the lower rate or whether it's a lower payment or whatever it may be, just like driving that crave for information early and often.
And I think that's exciting. I mean, we're at a really pivotal time in the industry where those expectations have risen. We have the technology to make things easier. So for me, that's what makes me very optimistic about the future of this industry. I'm curious what you and what Robbie, you would say makes you optimistic about the future of the industry and where we are today.
Not all.
Robbie, what makes you optimistic?
I'm optimistic
Cynical.
that a lot of the things that we've talked about for the industry, end-to-end digitization of mortgage, some of these AI technologies that we've talked about for the last year or two, are finally coming to reality. They're not concepts. They're out there. Even if your company might not be doing it, there are companies that are offering end-to-end digitization of the mortgage and can now speed through the process and meet consumers where consumers want to be met. And I talk about this a lot on my daily podcast, but this technological arms race that we're in as lenders. Well, my competitor can offer this technology or can offer this program or product in a very streamlined manner. I now need to do that or I'm going to get left behind. It's going to make the whole industry better. And it's almost like everybody's getting pulled forward, and those that aren't willing to get on the train, keep making too many weird analogies here. Those that aren't willing to get on the train are getting left in the dust, And so I'm really excited that we're finally at a point where it seems like everything that we're talking about is really coming to fruition, and it is going to make the process better. The cost savings are going to come through. Some of the common sense underwriting methodology will come to the fore, whether it's cash flow underwriting. Maybe we'll be able to move away from credit scores. Maybe we won't have to wait 7 days on an appraisal because we have such good property data and we have such good technology on the ways that houses age. And I matched, that you bought a washer from Home Depot 4 years ago. Well, it's time for a new washer versus it isn't, like all these things, we're getting to the point where there's some really exciting stuff with how we can get people through the process. How's that?
I'm glad you are making some weird, I would call them great analogies, because I love a good odd analogy. So I'm here for it.
Good, good, good. What excites you?
Yeah, I mean, all of that makes a lot. Just the what keeps me optimistic about millennials and Gen Z is like, man, we've been through the ringer when it comes to like what's happening in the macro economy in the last 20 years, coming of age in the housing crisis, going through COVID. Now just with volatility in the marketplace, and you never know what the future is going to hold, but I think we have had our eyes open to challenges on a macro level in the economy that maybe previous generations weren't aware of.
Mm.
And that because of that, we're going to make better or different decisions. And we're, causing those rethinks of what's good for me, what's good for family finances. Like, if I'm going to assume, if 7% interest rates are here to stay, like there's more of a sense of like what that means, I think, than there had been in previous generations.
I think that this is also a good opportunity, if you're an originator, understanding how your client views finances. Because I think I've told this story on the podcast before. My grandmother passed away in 2007, and she gave my sister me, I think it was $15,000 each. And I invested it. And then poof, up it went in flames in the stock market. And it's gone. And couple that with growing up playing video games where it's like you save up for a new car or something, and then the second you get that much money, cool, back down to $0 because I got the car that I wanted. Or everybody around me is getting rich quick on crypto type stuff. Well, I'm getting FOMO with my investments are only making 5-6% a year. Or inflation is through the roof. And so I might as well buy something today because it's just going to be that much more tomorrow. Like all these things, take into account, and obviously I just listed some unique ones that maybe
I'm a little like my heart rate just went up there, Robbie, with all those things you listed, because
but
that's
it's
the
like
reality we deal with every day. A consumer deals with.
that's not good financial literacy on my part, but I'm saying that's a reality that I live in. And so if you're an originator, understand your borrower. And if that's my mentality, and maybe it's different than somebody who grew up being taught. I had a lemonade stand and I saved every single weekend, and I save for, and I'm much better at that than Robbie might be. Like understand different borrowers have different ways of viewing finances, and meet them where they are. And that seems like a kind of the theme of today is what do consumers expect, or younger consumers expect, and how do we tailor our service or our product to that? And I have hope that that message is resonating with people out
Yeah,
there.
and knowledge and information is power, which is the world that, Kristin, you and Robbie, like that's the world you live in. But knowledge truly is power, and is powerful for the consumer, is powerful for the loan officer, and then building that relationship with them, so that as consumers ask questions, and answers are easy, answers that are tailored to their unique experience are easier. And then, that we have the industry underneath that can support the changing dynamics of personal income sheets.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the financial landscape has continued to become more complex, and so I feel like we need more. It's not just a demand that generationally we have things simplified or easier or things like that. It's like there's there's a real gap in knowledge, and there's a growing gap in the how complex the financial, everyone's financial landscape is. So I think we're needing more of this faster and in different parts of the process. So I think it's really exciting where you guys are building and really focusing in on an area that has historically been very dark and out of reach for consumers to have a simpler, more transparent experience. So I would love to, I want to ask you, Taylor, more a little bit different area of a question. You have sat on a lot of Empower panels and you've been an inspiring woman leader in this industry. But I'm curious if you have any advice for women coming into technology, maybe specifically mortgage technology, for, you know, how you can approach entering this space that has historically been very male dominated.
Man, I'm learning that every day. That's a great question. At the end of the day, people want to work for great people and great leaders and great companies. And that's where I feel really fortunate at Ardley is we have amazing leader. And you know, it starts at the top. And then building a company that we want to work for. And so I think for anyone out there looking to hire, that's where you start is like, are you building the company that you want to work for? And you know, it's easier to do that as a startup than when you're a large corporation trying to think about what 500, 1,000, 20,000 employees look like. That being said, I think as a woman in the industry, and we were laughing a little bit about this before coming on, but like I've always been told I'm the youngest person in the room, and I'm not that young anymore. And so like the industry has a problem with attracting younger, newer, fresher ideas, people to the industry, and that's something we're all going to have to work to break through because man, I can really stop conversation at a party when someone's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And it's like, "Oh, I work in, technology for mortgage servicers." And immediately people are like, "Oh, wait, I don't want to talk about my mortgage at a party. Like that's not cool." So there's a little bit of like a like an image issue I think that the industry has of like being closed off. But it takes more people like you guys and like what Empower does to spread the word and just know like mortgage is people too. And then bringing along and recruiting in. Like I love that we have an amazing team of like mortgage, like people that have been very entrenched in mortgage, but we've been able to branch out to a great product team whose background isn't in mortgage. And the combination of that can be really powerful, but it's built on a lot of relationships and people that we've been able to pull in from outside the industry and say like, hey, there's a real problem that can be solved here. That could use your talents. But then as a new person in the industry, you can't be afraid to ask questions. And you can't be afraid to look stupid, right? But like asking a question that might seem like, what is that? The acronyms are endless. Like, there's such a learning curve to get into the industry. And I think that's something that we all have to do better at too. When, bringing people in is like having the mindset of a teacher, of helping coach others along the way.
Real quick, Kristen, I want to answer your original question because I just got a haircut today, and I know I look like somebody's gay aunt. So I want to talk about women in the industry quickly. Sorry for the joke there. But I met somebody that recently joined the industry, Taylor, and they were like, I don't know what delegated versus non-delegated correspondent is. And I'm like, ask the question. Like, I don't think you're stupid for not knowing that. People, there was a learning curve for all of us. And I think that, yeah, we make it intimidating for new people in the industry to get in and feel comfortable. But it's like we all went through it. I needed the different channels to be explained to me over and over and over and over. What's an AE versus a broker versus a LO, all that stuff. And so I don't know how we can make it less intimidating. Maybe on Chrisman we could have like a mortgage 101s type of here's all your basic terms or something like that. But I do want to address the women thing specifically because for Women's History Month, I think I interviewed 25 or so women on my podcast and I got their response on this. There's only a ceiling if you like think of there being a ceiling. Some of the people I respect most in this industry are women that are CEOs of their own lenders. There's a woman chair of the MBA right now, Laura Escobar, who's amazing to listen to speak. I think of my good friend Anita Padilla Fitzgerald, who runs Megastar Financial Endeavor. These are people that said, to hell with the patriarchy or whatever. I'm gonna run a mortgage company, and I know I can do it better. And it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you're smart and you're hardworking, I think this industry rewards you. And maybe that's easy for me to say as a white man overlooking some of the sexism that happens at conferences that I hear about, where even men with their wedding rings on do things to these young saleswomen in mortgage that are like, are you kidding me? But in terms of what the limit is, I think that if um, you work hard, you can work towards what you want. And I will add as a closing point, hopefully I'm resonating. Hopefully some of this is resonating what I'm saying. But I will add as a closing point, nobody's going to say no if you ask them to be your mentor. Maybe they'll say, I don't have much time, and I'll try. But if you're a young woman in the industry and you want a mentor, whether that's a male in a leadership position or a female in a leadership position, I don't think anybody's going to turn you down and say, no, I don't want to do that. I think people are very open to bringing along new people and saying, if you're thirsty to learn, I'm happy to teach you.
Yeah, there's a couple things I would add to this. I think one is whether you look different, are an outsider, whatever, the more that you can, or if you're mentoring someone, bringing people in, I think when you said asking questions, it's even beyond that, more publicly asking questions, preparing yourself to be a leader and stand up, have a voice at the table. We've talked a lot about that at Empower events, but I think being able to really push yourself to have your voice heard, and then you can be appreciated as someone from the outside, and that it's almost vulnerability, but it's very much prepared. But that's something that helped me a lot coming into this industry, and differentiating myself was truly like preparing well ahead of meetings to have unique, or not even unique, but just questions that would add value to the group. So that was one area. And then also, I know we've made a ton of progress in the industry, in the world, but I know Taylor and I both have experienced challenges that have really, for me, wanted to push me out. I remember going into a meeting with an executive who said, like, I'm not hiring any more women. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, he just like fully was like, no more women in my life. And I just pushed through, and I know you remember that, Taylor. And there've been other, like advances that made me super uncomfortable and I wanted to pull out. But I think having that, going ahead and pushing through and setting boundaries, instead of being pushed out, is really important, for me, and something that I would want to share with other women coming in or people that feel like they're on the outside in some way.
We said it too during the show. The most valuable people to the industry right now might be those coming in from a weird angle, coming in from left field, rethinking the process. Not, this is how everybody's done it, so this is how I need to do it. I need to make it a little better. I can do it completely differently, and it's going to be better. Taylor, any final thoughts?
No, I just echo all those sentiments, and the best people to continue to pave the path is you, right? Every individual on this call makes decisions every day that can make the industry a better place to work, more attractive to people from the outside looking in and trying to join it. Like, we control our own destiny. And yeah, there's we've all had the experiences at conferences and whatnot, but like part of it too is like coaching people through that, like, and being a leader and example to others coming in the industry.
Yeah, and I think that's part of being an innovator too. It's like not being afraid to push through, and have a different perspective, and making sure that your voice is heard around that different perspective, or thinking about things differently. So I'm just really excited about the work that you guys are doing at Ardley, and the leadership that you're bringing, Taylor, to the industry as someone new with a different perspective. And it's really exciting.
Well, thank you. It's been, gosh, fun to be on this podcast. We've been so focused on, building and growing that all of a sudden you look up and 4 years later and, here I get to finally talk about things. So thanks for getting me out of my office, so to speak, today to come and chat. I appreciate it.
Any closing thoughts, Robbie?
Nope, loved it. I'm gonna text you after the show. Great show per usual. Taylor, really appreciative of you coming on. Very appreciative to Form Free for sponsoring today's show. And I love doing that. I mean, my thoughts with like the career and mortgage. I love having a career in mortgage. Sure, there's some weird downsides that we've alluded to here, but it provides a good life for good people. I really enjoy the relationships I have. I love my relationship with you, Kristin. Taylor, very happy to now like have formally met you. I hope to see you at a conference soon. And yeah, it makes me really happy to do stuff like this. So thanks, y'all.
Yeah. It's fun to have these conversations and look at different areas of the industry and where we're evolving. So yeah, thanks for bringing in this perspective today, Taylor, and really appreciate everyone on the call for participating and being here today. So thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All right, bye.